Hello, good morning student. I welcome you to the class, and today we are going to do the question answer from the lesson from the diary of young Anne Frank, written by Anne Frank only. And I told you children about the authors also. We have already completed this lesson, but once before doing the lesson question and answer, I'm going to revise all the important points of the lesson. So first of all, this lesson is diary is written by Anne Frank only. This is based on facts. This is a true story. So first of all, I would like to tell you something about Anne Frank only. So Anne Frank, she was born in June 1929 in February, and she died in March 1945. This was a date, if you will remember, World War II was going on in the world, and was a German Jew. So she was a belonging from the Jewish family from Germany. The 12-year-old Jewish girl wrote the diary of young Frank while in hiding with her family and 4 friends in Amsterdam during the Nazis' occupation of the Netherlands in World War II. After 2 years in hiding, the group was betrayed and transported to a concentration camp in Bergen, where Anne and her elder sister Margot, they both died of typhus in 1945. Her father Otto, the only survivor of the group, found her diary, and when he read the diary, he was so impressed that for 2 reasons, he wanted to publish the diary. First, he wanted to show the world how talented her daughter was, and more important was that he wanted to present through that diary what really happened in the Nazis camp, how cruel they were and how people were dying like insects in the camp. And finally, it got published also in English under the name of The Diary of a Young Girl. Children, that diary has become very, very famous all over the world, and many countries they translated in their own mother tongue. Now, what was the theme of writing that diary? The Diary of Young Frank was the given extract is one of the most authentic work describing the atrocities committed on the Jews during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands in 1940. It also provides an intimate account of daily life that her small groups led in hiding in Amsterdam. Her frankness, honesty, and sincerity of description of the parents, friends, and teacher make her writing the most important document of the Holocaust period. Now children, I will be telling you about all the important points of the diary and the background. So children, diary writing was a strange experience for Anne Frank. Anne Frank thinks that the writing diary is a strange experience for her. She has never written anything like it before. She feels that no one else except her will be interested in the musing of a 13-year-old school girl. She write it for herself. She wants to get all kinds of things off her chest. Paper has more patience than people. Anne feels that paper has more patience than people. There was a time when she was little depressed and sat at home. She doesn't want anyone else except her to read her stiff-backed notebook unless she finds a real friend, and the name of her friend was Kitty, which was a diary, and this name Kitty was given to her diary by herself only, by Anne Frank only. So her diary was her that means Kitty, which was the name of her diary, was her best friend by now. Anne writes that outwardly there are about 30 people whom she can call friends. She has a family, loving aunts, and a good home. She was loving parents and 16-year-old sister, but still she feels all alone. She can only talk about ordinary things with them. They are not able to come closer. This is the problem. They can't confide in each other. Maybe it is her own fault. This is why she has started the diary. She wants her diary to be her friend. She calls her diary her friend Kitty, as I told you just now. Now, brief sketch of family. She calls her father the most adorable father. He married at 36 when her mother was 25. Her sister Margot was born in 1926 while she was born in 12th June 1929. They emigrated to Holland in 1933. She got her education there. In 1942, her grandma died and started writing her diary on 20th June 1942. Now, she has described an incident where the class was shaking with fear. The entire class is shaking with fear. The teacher will decide in the next meeting who will move up and who will be kept back. She realized that at least there are about a quarter of the students who are totally worthless and should be kept back. But it is difficult to predict about the decision of the teacher. She is not much worried about herself and her girlfriend. She is not very sure about maths. She has got good relation with her teacher. Mr. Keesing, the maths teacher, is an old-fashioned teacher. He doesn't like her because she talks too much. Now, children, a classroom scene I'm going to tell, which she has mentioned in her diary. The maths teacher gives her some extra work to write an essay on a chatterbox because she was the one who used to talk. Though many children talk, but according to the teacher, she was the person who talked too much in the class. She writes 3 pages. She argues in the essays that talking is a student's trait. She promised to keep it under control. She feels that she will never be able to cure herself of the habit. Her mother also talked as much as she does. It is an inherited trait. Mrs. Kissing has a good length at her arguments in the essay. He assigns her a second essay also on an incorrigible chatterbox. So Mrs. Kissing, it seems he doesn't like Anne Frank, and he tells her that she has to write second essay also. Okay. Now, children, the math teacher gives her some extra work to write an essay on a chatterbox. She writes 3 pages. She argues in the essays that talking is a student's trait. She promised to keep it under control. She feels that she will never be able to cure herself of the habit. Her mother also talked as much as she does. It is an inherited trait. Mr. Keesing has a good laugh at her arguments in the essay. He assigns her a second essay on an incorrigible chatterbox. Finally, as punishment for talking in the class, he gives her another essay on quick, said Mistress Chatterbox. The class gives a roar of laughter. Her friend San is good at poetry. She offers to help her and wants to turn the table on Mr. Keesing. She finishes the poem about a mother duck and a father swan with 3 babies duckling. They are beaten to death by the father because they quack too much. Mr. Keesing understands the poem and its message on the right way. Since then, she has been allowed to talk. She has not been assigned with any extra homework. So, children, this was the main theme. So, Anne Frank was she wrote a diary, which was a very strange experience for Anne Frank. She writes only to lighten the burden on her heart. Okay. Uh, She feels that paper has more patience than people. She wants to keep a diary as she doesn't have a friend. She wants the diary to be her true friend, and she is going to call her friend Kitty. She got her education in Amsterdam, and she started writing her diary from 20 June 1945. Sorry, 1942. So she feels that a quarter of students are worthless and deserve to be kept back. The math teacher, Mr. Keesing, is an old-fashioned teacher. He is annoyed with Anne as she talks too much in the class. But though many other students talk, but he is after her life only, and he gives her an extra homework to write an essay on a chatterbox. She writes that she has inherited the habit of talking from her mother. Mr. Keesing has a good laugh at her arguments and gives to write another essay on an incorrigible chatterbox. Mr. Keesing was trying to play a joke on Anne by giving such an essay to her. She finished the essay in verse with the help of her friend Sam. Mr. Keesing read the poem and the message in the right way. After that, he has allowed Anne to talk in the class. Since then, a change has come in Keesing's and he has started making jokes. Now, children, we will be doing the question and answer. Okay, so first we will be doing the NCR textbook question and answer. So, what makes writing in a diary a strange experience for Anne Frank? Anne Frank started writing a diary from 20th June 1942. A diary is really a strange experience for her. She has never written any such thing earlier. Moreover, she was too young to be taken. She was too young to be taken seriously. She thinks that no one will take interest in the missing of a 13-year-old girl. Question number 2. Why does Anne Frank want to keep a diary? In spite of her family and friends, Anne felt rather lonely. There were 30 persons whom she could call her friend. She could talk only ordinary, everyday things with them. She could not share most feeling with them, nor could she confide in them. She wanted the diary to be her friend. She named her friend Kitty. Why did Anne think she could confide more in her diary than in people, and believed that paper had more patience than people? No doubt she had a family, her loving parents, an elder sister and friend, but she could not share her intimate experience and problem with them. So she decided to get all kinds of things off her chest and maintain a diary. Now, oral comprehension check. Why does Anne provide a brief sketch of her life? Anne decides to write her diary regularly. Her diary is her best friend and she names it Kitty. She feels no one would understand a word of her stories to Kitty if she narrates them directly. She doesn't like to provide her personal details to others, but it would be prudent to provide a brief sketch of her life for better understanding of her writing. What tells you that Anne loved her grandmother? Now, children, Anne loved her grandmother rather deeply. When her parents immigrated to Holland in 1933 and her elder sister Margot were sent to Aachen to stay with her grandmother in 1941, she fell ill and died in 1942. She loved and remembered her so often even after her death. She lighted a special candle for her grandmother on her birthday as a mark of respect for her. Now, oral comprehension check of page number 54. Why was Mr. Keesing annoyed with Anne? What did he ask her to do? Mr. Keesing was an old-fashioned man. He did not like his students talking in the class. He was annoyed with Anne as she talked too much in the class. As a sort of punishment, he asked her to write an essay on a chatterbox. How did Anne justify her being a chatterbox in her essay? So, children, Anne justified her being a chatterbox in her essay. She agreed that talking is a student's trait. She would never be able to cure herself of the habit. Her, her mother talked as much as she did, if not more. She promised to do her best to keep her habit of talking under control. However, not much can be done about inherited traits. Do you think Mr. Keesing was a strict teacher? Yes, Mr. Keesing was an old-fashioned foggy. He liked to maintain a strict discipline in the class. He was annoyed with Anne as she talked too much in the class. As a punishment, he asked her to write several essays on Chatterbox. A change came in him when Anne turned the table on him. He allowed her to talk and never gave her any extra homework. What made Mr. Keesing allowed Anne to talk in the class? Anne did not stop talking in the class even after being given extra work. So Mr. Keesing asked her to write an essay on quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. She wanted to write something original. Her friend San offered to write the essays in verse. Mr. Kissing was trying to play a joke on her by giving her to write an essay on such a ridiculous subject. Now the joke was on him. The poem was about a swan the father was a swan biting his three baby ducklings to death because his three baby ducklings talked too much. They quacked too much. Mr. Keesing took the joke in the right spirit. Since then, he had allowed Anne to talk in the class. Now, thinking about the text, page number 54. Was Anne right when she said that the world would not be interested in the music of a 13-year-old girl? Anne believed, and not without reason, that no one would be interested in the music of a 13-year-old girl. However, she was proved false. The Diary of a Young Girl has been translated into many languages throughout the world. It is considered to be one of the most authentic documents of the Holocaust period. It describes graphically the atrocities and tortures that the Jews faced during the Nazi occupation of Holland. There are some examples of diary or journal entries in the before you read section. Compare this with what Anne writes in her diary. What language was the diary originally written in? In what way is Anne's diary different? Anne writing in her diary are quite different from the others. These are entries of a 13-year-old girl forced to live in a hiding to escape arrest from the Nazi police. Feeling all alone, she pours out the burden of her heart through writing a diary. She described many details of her personal life, her friends, her family. However, her writing don't ignore the harshest cruelties and atrocities that her race, the Jews, were suffering during Hitler's occupation of Holland. Why does Anne need to give a brief sketch about her family? Does she treat Kitty as an inside or an outsider? Anne realizes that her readers may not understand her writing well. Till she gives a brief sketch of her family. It will help to understand her and her musing in a better way. She wants the diary to be her friend and she names it Kitty. Kitty is an insider and she confided in Kitty and gets all kinds of things off her heart through her writing. How does Anne feel about her father, her grandmother, Mrs. Cuperus and Mrs. Kissing, and Mr. Kissing, her math teacher? What do these tell you about her? So children, Anne considered her father as the most adorable father. She stayed with her grandmother when her parents were away. She loves and respects her deeply. She was deeply attached to the headmistress also, Mrs. Cuperes. She was moved to tears during her farewell. She did not go well with the old fogey Mr. Kissing, who was annoyed because she talked too much. What does Anne writes in her first essay? Anne tries to justify her habit of talking in her first essay, A Chatterbox. She argues that talking is a student trend. She would never be able to cure herself of this habit. Her mother talked as much as she did, if not more. She would do her best to keep it under control. It is very difficult to give up inherited traits. Anne says teachers are most unpredictable. Is Mr. Kissing unpredictable? How? So, children, according to Anne is not wrong when she says that teachers are most unpredictable. It depends upon them whether a student will go up in the next class or not. Mr. Kissing loses his temperament on truffles. He goes on punishing Anne for her talking too much by giving assignment of writing essays. But his attitude changes in the end. He allows her to talk and stop giving her extra work as punishment. Question number 7 now we will do. What do these statements tell you about Anne Frank as a person? Children, there are many short questions out there. So first, we don't seem to be able to get any closer, and that's the problem. Maybe it's my fault that we don't confide in each other. So she can't confide in with so-called friends, and she thinks it is her mistake, and talk certain intimate issues with them. First, we can get the following glimpses of Anne characters after reading this statement. Second, she wants to load off her feeling and intimate issue through her writing in her diary. So, children, the third statement in the question is given. Margot went to Holland in December. I followed in February when I was plunked down on the table as a birthday present for Margaret. It shows that her parents gave more importance to her elder sister Margaret. Now, fourth point is this written in the question. If you ask me, there are so many dummies that about a quarter of the class should be kept back, but teachers are the most unpredictable creature on earth. So, children, it shows her frankness. She doesn't hesitate to give opinion about her classmates and about the unpredictable attitude of her teachers. Now, fifth one, anyone could ramble on and leave big space between the word, but the trick was to come up with convincing arguments to prove the necessity of talking. It shows her seriousness as she wants to come up with convincing arguments to justify the necessity of talking to her in her essay. Now, children, thinking about her language. Okay, this we can do in the book only. Okay, like heartbreaking produces great sadness, homesick, missing home and family very much. Blockhead is an informal word which means a very stupid person. Law abiding, obeying and respecting the law. Overdo, do something to an excessive degree. Daydream, think about pleasant thing, forgetting about the present. Breakdown, an occasion when vehicles, machine stop working. Output, something produced by a person, machine or an organization. So children, these were that, and now I would like to do some additional question answer and some long question answer. Okay, so children, we will be doing some additional question answer. Now children, in the long question, you can see give a brief sketch of Anne Frank. Okay, then this question is there, why does Anne Frank think it prudent and wise to provide a brief sketch of her life. So Anne Frank called her diary her best friend and named her Kitty. She addresses all her writing to Kitty. For readers, it would be rather difficult to understand a word of her stories to Kitty. So instead of plunging right in, she thinks it wise to provide a brief sketch of her life, though she disliked doing so. Now, uh, what motivated Anne Frank to write in a diary? It should not be forgotten that Anne was living in a hiding. She could not have a normal dealing with the people outside. She could talk about ordinary things with her family and her friend. She could not talk highly personal and intimate issues with them. She did not have any real friend. She felt utterly lonely and depressed. Writing in diary could get all kinds of things off her chest. Um, why does Anne feel that writing in a diary is really a strange experience? So it must be remembered that Anne Frank was just a 13-year-old girl. She was in the hiding and cut off from the larger world. She was hesitant that no one would be interested in the musing of a young girl. She had never written anything before, so it was naturally a young, strange experience for her. Now, why was the entire class quaking in its boots? It is true that the whole class was shaking with fear. The teacher were to decide about the fate of the students. They were to decide who would go up in the next class or not. Half of the class was making bets. The verdict of the teacher could go either way. They were quite unpredictable creatures on earth, according to Anne. Now, Anne Frank had a great attachment with her grandmother. Justify your answer. So there's no doubt that Anne Frank had a great attachment with her grandmother. When her parents migrated to Holland, she, along with her elder sister Margaret, were sent to live her grandmother's in Aachen. The grandmother died in January 1942. She thought of her quite often and still loved her. Why was the entire class quaking in both this we have discussed? Then, how did Anne justify her habits of talking in her first essay on Chatterbox? Anne Frank wrote 3 pages on the topic A Chatterbox. In the essays that she justified her habit of talking. She argued that talking was a student trait. She would never be able to cure herself of the habit. Her mother talked so much as she did, if not more. She would do her best to keep it under control. However, it was very difficult to control her inherited trait. What were the second and the third essay assigned to Anne Frank as punishment? So Mr. Kissing had a good laugh at an arguments in the first essay on a chatterbox. He assigned her a second essay on an incorrigible chatterbox. She did write on the subject. Mr. Kissing was not satisfied. He said, Anne Frank, as punishment for talking in the class, write an essay entitled Quack, 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 said Mistress Chatterbox. How did she write the last essay? Quack, 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 said Miss Chatterbox. So, student, the third essay assigned to Anne Frank was also related to chatterboxes. She had lost her originality on the subject. Her friend San was good at poetry. She offered to help Anne in writing the essay in verse. The poem was about a mother duck and a father swan and 3 ducklings. And the poor ducklings were beaten to death by the father because they quaked too much. How did Mr. Kissing take Anne's third essay in verse? How did he react? Do you find a change in him? Mrs. Kissing took Anne's jokes the right way. He got the message Anne wanted to give to him by narrating the death of 3 ducklings. He read the poem to the class, adding his own comments. Since then, she had been allowed to talk and hadn't been assigned any extra homework as he was transferred man now. Okay, so and now children, brief sketches of Anne Frank, brief sketches of her father. Okay, this can also be asked. Then what made Anne Frank write a diary? Anne Frank was highly sensitive girl. She was a 13-year-old girl. She did not find herself very comfortable in the society she was growing up. It should be remembered that she and her family were made to live in a hiding to escape arrest. They were Jews. Those were horrible times. Nazis had let loose untold atrocities on the Jews. Living in such unpleasant circumstances, the young girl could not confide in the people around her. She could not share her personal and intimate issues with her so-called friends. She needed to get all kinds of things off her heart. She realizes that paper has more patience than people. She wanted the diary to be her friend, and she named her also as Kitty. She knows it clearly that people would not be interested in the missing of a 13-year-old girl. And children, with this, our question answer is completed. This lesson is completed, and this I conclude the video here. Thank you and have a nice day ahead.